so awesome.
Oh,
Greg, that was so awesome to hear your thoughts. And I'll see what I can do here to address, sort of the elephant in the room too, which is so many of us are at a place where we're not just storytelling our product or our service, but our careers and our lives at large. I think you'll find, hopefully, that my background makes me want to think big about these things. And if you ever just, as someone who's forced out of federal service, I'm more than happy to sit with you and think through, pro bono, of course, and think through, how you might represent the story of your career in a way that packs as much punch as possible. But I'm so grateful to hear you volunteering and being a part of the community. I couldn't agree more about Janine and the work that she does and that ORPIB is doing. I sit on a right. Jennifer's clapping. I mean, come on, right? We're so lucky, and I just want more of it in my life. To give you a little bit of background, I have been a lifelong queer person who's been able to sort of hide in my feminist in a lot of ways. And when all of this stuff started going down at some point last fall, when it was like, I got to do something. This is the first place I turned as someone who's been allied or been part of the movement in lots of different ways, but have not stuck my neck out enough. I'm actually here to help represent and materially contribute to this community. And so that's kind of why I'm here. I sit on the foundation board, and I'm really grateful to have that position to be able to get a sense of what ORPIB looks like to the broader community, not just members, but really thinking about, how we're a part of this, the business ecosystem and the regional ecosystem. And I am one of the directors of the incubator, which will announce very soon a call for applications. So we'll have between 2 and 5 entrepreneurs, depending on our funding, that we'll be able to support. So keep your ears and eyes out for more information about that. If you're interested in getting involved, please reach out to me. We would love to have wise folks involved in lifting up and making sure we've got a couple of new sustainable queer businesses in the region, especially those run by people who experience intersectionality in all kinds of different ways, and folks who are outside the Portland metro area as well. So that's my little pitch. Here I am. I'm Ali Maaxa. I am sometimes a professor of anthropology and folklore and women's and gender studies and Black studies and post-colonial studies and anthropology. I think those are most of the departments I've sat in. I was in a sociology department for a little bit, so I'm kind of a globetrotter. But I am also a person who, for my own reasons, wasn't able to sustain long-term work in the academy. If you look at my business background, you might get a sense of why I'm not there anymore, sitting in post-colonial women's and gender studies department. So it was time for me to get to Portland and contribute to the business ecosystem here. I spent a number of years in tech working on sustainable and ethical tech, doing work like trying to make recycling resources more accessible to people from all walks of life in the Portland metro region. So part of what I did was partner with um, tribal authorities and people living in Section 8 housing and people in Gresham and people outside the city center and non-homeowners, et cetera, to try to make sure that recycling is more accessible to them. All of this relates back to, and I've made stuff in high tech. So I was actually in AI for a while. And when I joined it, I was thinking, I'm gonna figure out what's going on with AI so I can tell people as an anthropologist what's going on. And now I have one of those relationships to tech that's like, I don't know if I'm helping or hurting. I'm some sort of a middle space. And so what I'm really trying to do is help underrepresented founders across industry actually get their businesses to a place where they're able to take tech, get the resources that they need, and thrive in business, right? So for me, regardless of industry, whether it's tech, whether it's consumer packaged goods, a lot of us have services-based businesses. What I do is take all of this history in high-powered storytelling for tech and in industry, for doing design research, like I did with Oregon Metro's recycling program, or for supporting small businesses and startups, which is what I'm doing now, and sort of give those tools over to our founders so that they can tell stories that will bring resources to this community. And so, to that end, anybody who's on this call, anybody who sees this, reach out. I'm happy to sit with you pro bono for an hour, especially if you're an ORPIB member, but even if you're not, and let you know what storytelling can do for you or give you a couple of ideas. So, I've been doing a lot of that lately. And I do have storytelling coaching packages. They're very low overhead, very affordable. So reach out if that interests you. But I'm not here to do sales. I'm actually here to bring resources to you as quickly and efficiently as possible. So, oh, we're not going to meet Josh. Instead, we're going to go to this very pixelated gelato stand. So, come along with me for this story. It is the last day of school for my fourth grader, Serene, and he is coming out of Buckman Elementary School, and he is thrilled to be done for the year. He does not love school. He would rather be riding a skateboard and learning things in all kinds of experience-based ways out in the world. So he made it, and I was so proud of him. And so every year we had a yearly ritual, which is I scoop him up and we go get some gelato. So I do that, and we walk toward our local gelato shop. And sure enough, I look around and everyone seems to be heading in the same direction. When we finally get to where we're going, there's a line that wraps all the way around the block of parents and their kids who are trying to get their special scoop of gelato to celebrate the last day of school. It's like absolutely gorgeous out. The kids are thrilled. They're all chatting and talking with each other, and they're so excited, and they want their gelato, right? Coming straight from school. So we're standing in this line, and all of a sudden I realize, we're maybe 15, 20 minutes in, doesn't seem to be moving very quickly. My kid looks at me and goes, "Mom, I have to pee." And I'm going, wait a minute, Serene, like we've already been in the line for 15 minutes. There's nowhere else to get any ice cream. I don't know where in the middle of a city you're going to be able to just go use a restroom. I'm not sure what to say. I send him off around the corner to see if there's a local shop that he can jump into. Nothing, right? And so we wait online a little bit further. I'm like, "Can you hold it?" Sure, sure. So we're getting further in line. And sure enough, he can't hold it much longer. And I go to the end of the line to kind of figure out what the holdup is. And this is what I see. There is a huge line of kids waiting for their gelato. Each of them has a different, idea of what they want. Each of them is looking at this list of different flavors that they can have. They're getting inside and they're sampling different ones, right? And each is taking a very long time to decide what he or she or they want. And that's what's holding up the line. And I go, huh, if only we could move this along more quickly by hanging up a sign outside of the gelato shop that actually has all of the different flavors so that the kids can decide before they get in there so we can move the kids out, right? So I go back to Serena and I go, "I think it's going to take a while, kiddo." And he's like, "Oh, Mom, well, we had to pull the eject button. We couldn't go." Now, this is the best gelato in town, okay? I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about, and it's excellent. But here's this long line, this inaccessibility, kids who are coming straight from school, right? And are probably going to have to go to the bathroom at some point. We hit the eject button, had to walk across. He was very disappointed, had to walk across to the grocery store where he got to use the bathroom. And we bought a pint of ice cream and everything was fine. But that's the beginning and the end story of a very emotional moment that was impacted by customer experience. So these are the questions that we ask around storytelling. And I'll tell you a little bit about how this maps on to what you do in business. But here we go. What was expected? I'm going to move this little tab here so I can actually see my slides. What was expected of the product or situation? This is the question that I always ask when we sit down to write down the stories that we want to tell. What did we expect out of that situation? Well, a really good scoop of gelato, right? But something much, much more than that. It wasn't just the product. We never had a problem with the product. It was really great. It was the experience that we were really getting set up for. And while this gelato shop is the best when it comes to the product itself, it is embedded in the experience of the customers, which we had to pull the eject button. And I'll tell you, there were probably a dozen times since then that this gelato shop, which is within, let's say, 10 blocks of my house, we didn't go because we didn't want to get stuck in that situation again. We started getting boba instead of gelato, right? Because our experience was so disappointing. And the kid just didn't ask for gelato anymore. What was the best case scenario that could have come out of that? He gets his ice cream, he gets his gelato. We stand in the corner. He's got all his friends. Everybody's got their best tasting scoop. They're really happy. They run around like crazy for a good hour. And then that's the ceremony, that's the ritual. So they didn't just want the product, the kids wanted the ritual, right? Oops. Okay, the screen sharing is still on. Okay. So then the question becomes, what did you actually do? Well, instead of the ritual, we had to come up with a new one, which was just figure it out, go across the street, get a spoon. The kid eats the ice cream out of a pint at a at a picnic table outside the grocery store, and it was perfectly fine. But how does he feel now? Well, he's not a big fan of the gelato shop anymore. Let's see. So people tell me stories. I do behavioral science for product strategy, meaning that I understand the lived experiences of customers, markets, users, teams, patients, recycling customers, and clients for people. I hear stories all day long. In fact, it's something that I've been doing for I'm 49 now, about 27 years, ever since I was a journalist back for, if any of you are from the Bay Area, you might remember the SF Bay Guardian back in the day. So I was a long form journalist there back in the late 90s. And I've traveled the world listening to the stories that people tell me about the different products and services that they use. So here I am doing my dissertation fieldwork down there in the bottom middle. I worked with young women and elders across West Africa to understand the ways that they were using digital technologies and taking their traditional cultures and using the internet to sell goods, to reach out to family who are in diaspora, to get remittances, they call it, or paychecks from people who are working abroad sent back home so that they can buy rice and food and take care of their families, but also to tell stories. I worked directly with those storytellers to learn how they were using digital technologies, recordings. They do a lot of storytelling on the street, take film and video of it, and then store it on their SIM cards and then swap their SIM cards over T. So the people I was working with in Senegal, for instance, have SIM cards that are just full of field recordings of people singing songs and telling stories as part of their daily cultural lives. And everyone becomes this walking library just with their phones of all of these. So that was fascinating. That's the kind of work I do. And before that, I worked with young people in Mississippi to understand how they were transposing the blues and gospel and traditional praise singing and storytelling into digital technologies, how they were using the internet, how they were using YouTube and digital media to tell stories, but more so how they were using the recording studio and technologies like the vocoder or auto tune to make their voices sound more emotional and give that sort of blues aesthetic. So here I am working in the dump at Oregon Metro, watching recycling users and others use all of their facilities to try to create programs that would make access to recycling more equitable. They're in tech on the top left and on the right, talking not just to people using technologies, but to teams of users as well to understand their lived experiences. Now I'm taking all of that experience and bringing it to small businesses and underrepresented founders. Those are the people I want to work with so that they can tell their stories in a way that doesn't, first of all, make them feel vulnerable in a way that's uncomfortable for them or demand from them some of the stereotypical stories that industry might demand of underrepresented founders, right? So that's really critical, that agency of self-representation without having dictated to us the way that we tell our stories. So there's a lot of empowerment there. B, in a way that's going to not just persuade possible investors with a pitch deck, possible buyers, but also our markets and our customers. And then finally, this piece, just like the gelato story I told at the top of this, where we're not just telling the stories of how great our product is and why we're really cool and why people should buy things from us, but so that we're discovering not just what we make, and how that works in practice, but what people want and need for us. What are the rituals that surround the products and services that we offer? How can we discover those so that we can better serve our users and make a more powerful product? That conversation between us as business leaders and founders and makers and those users who become co-makers. They become collaborators. Ideally, they become collaborators with us in the business relationship, right? I wanted to make my kids' own experience using their gelato, right? So how can we deeply connect with our customers and our users and markets in an authentic way, right? Beyond just the sense of, now I'm going to tell you a really zingy story that's going to catch, right? So those stories are good too, and those stories can become a part of our business storytelling, but there is a science to storytelling. And I'll tell you a little bit about where it comes from. Now, the reason why I switched to storytelling as a primary sort of way to talk about my services, especially for small businesses, happened a couple years ago. And here's a quick story that may blow your minds. It's still blowing mine, but it was about 2 years ago. I experienced some changes in my family that had me at 47 years old, looking for my birth parents. I'm adopted. I was a closed adoption, adopted at birth, what they call the baby scoop era. So just after Roe v. Wade was introduced, but wasn't widely used or accessible. And so I was given up in a closed adoption at that time. And I grew up with parents, one who was a welder and one who worked with what they called the Molly Maids, a cleaning service in Iowa. But I knew that I had come from New Jersey, and that's where they got me from. In fact, right now is that strange little time between my birthday and the gotcha day where I kind of ask myself a lot of questions about who I am. Anyway, somehow throughout my life, I always really excelled in music, storytelling, and story collecting. So I wanted to be a journalist growing up, and that was my obsession. And so I started learning how to collect and tell stories very early on and how to do documentary work. Before long, I found myself writing for the SFA Guardian and then eventually started to do that field work in Mississippi and beyond. And then I went to graduate school and have been in anthropology and folklore departments for a very long time. So that folklore background was really essential to understanding how global digital technologies work. So I did do this sort of intersection of those two things, understanding how people's lived experiences and stories not just use technologies, but remake those technologies, right? And what's wild is a couple years ago, after finding my birth parents, my adopted parents didn't know what to make of this. Like my going to get a PhD in folklore and anthropology. I find my birth parents, and lo and behold, my birth mother is indeed, well, I'll start with my birth father, is a psychiatrist in New York. So he's doing that. We're in touch. And my birth mother is a professional PhD folklorist. So there's something in the genetics here. And so this obsession with storytelling as a thing goes way, way back. I know, isn't that wild, Leslie? Yeah. And we have been at the same conferences and everything. So anyway, this attunement to stories is actually really powerfully meaningful to me. It's not just this thing that we sit down and do. It is a deep technology and a deep language that's taken very seriously all across the world with all kinds of structure, but it's also taken very lightly because it invokes innovation and improvisation and groupthink and fun and play and sampling and resampling and remixing. Okay, so before there were TED Talks for 50,000 years, at the very least, and it depends what you think of as storytelling, because Neanderthals did it too, right? Before there were TED Talks, there was story collecting. So it's not just about the telling, it's about the story making, right? So we think about how we can apply the insights that come from listening to stories, from telling stories, that come from building stories with our customers, how we could apply that to each of these things that should matter to each of you as small business owners or as humans in industry? We can convince our customers, sure. And so you look at the back of the Ben and Jerry's carton, and now they've been doing really well for a really long time, right? They're awesome. They broke into the industry very early with an incredible product. They couldn't have done better. So when you look at the back of their pint of ice cream, it tells us they were a couple of farmers who knew each other in Vermont. And we get that sense of the culture of where they come from and what they do. What they do not have to get convince us about is the quality of their ice cream. But we have to convince our customers about the quality of what we're making or offering. And we have to show that impact in order to convince them. We are just not resourced the way they are. I mean, if you are, let me know. I'd love to come work for you. But I think so much of us struggle with finding our place in the market, right? And so we have to do something a little bit richer than just that. We want to talk about the culture of who we are and why our product is awesome and why we're choosing, for instance, like Ben and Jerry's, no growth hormone milk, right, for our products. But we also want to tell them what impact our product is going to have for them. And when we do that, we start rallying our stakeholders. So I know the shorthand term for this talk was for your pitch deck, right? And I work with a lot of VCs and investors who are both investing in tech and they're investing in small businesses and consumer packaged goods and part of this ecosystem. I know what they're looking for in order to rally them or to rally other stakeholders that you're working with who might be your customers. It might be a marketing partner. It might be your own partner, an early hire. It might be the business community. You want to show them the impact of what they do, not just on an individual level. You don't just want to say, hey, these kids come here. This is what marks their yearly transition out of school for every kid in this neighborhood who can afford it, who has access to it, and who wants it. Gelato is the thing to do. Wouldn't that be great? And so our business decisions around where we hang our signs, how we facilitate our customers, it's all built around that piece. We ask them what they want and need from us. And when we can show our investors that we're thinking about that, they're ready to go. And I'm not going to go on forever, but I'll probably wrap up the speaking part and give some time for questions in about 12 minutes so that we can leave a little pad at the end of this for you to come and go and get to your next meetings. Pitch investors, move your market through social media. Now, that TikTok story, that can be really compelling. If I just started with the story of me and my birth mother, right? Great. It's a great way to get a lot of attention online. But what I'm also trying to reflect is that this reflects on the quality and the impact of what I do and why it's very meaningful for me to bring impactful consulting and storytelling to the clients that I work with, right? So we don't just want to tell that question of who we are and where we're from. We're going to show how that actually leads to customer impact, customer obsession, and a lifelong product market pulse that is going to keep us apace with our customers' evolving needs and desires. And for those of us who are working in any sort of packaged goods or even in the restaurant industry, this shifting economy is going to call for lots and lots of change. So just keeping a pace with them means not only storytelling, but story collecting. So that's the last piece, is that learning. We use storytelling as a way to cultivate back and forth collaborative conversations. So we're going to tap into humanity's oldest social media, 50,000 years at the very least. And I'm going to quote a couple of storytellers who are from this region or who lived a long time in this region. And the first is Edward Colty. He's a Chinook storyteller, and he reminds us that stories are not always linear or feel good. They teach lessons. And I turn to him because when Franz Boas, the anti-fascist anthropologist who really started American anthropology in the 1920s, out of Columbia University, and he was the mentor to Zora Neale Hurston, for instance. He came to the coast of Oregon and Washington, all the way up to Vancouver, and he worked directly with the Shinhooks. So this is all open source. You can all find it online. Franz Boas's collections of stories, they were collected largely from Edward Colty in his native language. And this is like the 1880s, 1890s, and in a move to preserve these stories. And what's so amazing, these stories tend to be about a salmon spirit, a wolf spirit, various animal spirits who can transform between the animal and human worlds, right? So they're often shapeshifters. And the salmon spirit is often a beautiful young man with long feathers and dentalia in his hair, various ornaments from the sea and from sea creatures, and has this beautiful long hair and can sometimes transform into twins. And when Colty tells the story of salmon spirit, he does use the masculine pronouns, but the salmon spirit can transpose into lots of different forms. And when Colty sits down to tell the story, it lasts hours and hours, even days, because instead of it having a beginning, a middle, and an end with the big hero's journey, like we might hear from a lot of, Western storytellers, especially those based in the North Atlantic, instead of this one brave, um, single hero-based story, this is about people and spirits returning time and time again to different processes so that they can learn lessons over time. So you watch the salmon spirit come to the same place and have the same interactions and then return to the water and come visit another house and have a similar interaction, trying to get people to change their behavior and change their ways. But the spirit can't figure out how to do it in a way that's meaningful. And so over the course of the story, we get to learn with the salmon spirit what he encounters. And we get these really imperfect main characters, just like we are, right? So here's a quote. Here's an example from one of those. Then he lost his senses and broke his uncle's town and killed all the people. Now he recovered. He had broken all the houses. His hands were full of blood, and he thought, oh, what a fool I was. The thing I wanted is bad. He tried to throw it away, but it stuck to his flesh. So what we really have, I know that sounds very intense. The stories are absolutely beautiful, and I encourage you to go back and read them. We have people going through these processes time and time again, just like somebody might go to your gelato shop over and over again and have that same, maybe less disappointing, but slightly disappointing experience. Or we might have a customer who's trying to use your product, doesn't quite get it at first, and you show them how to do this right with like the right kind of outreach or the right kind of educational materials. And we get to watch them over a couple of different uses master this process, right? It's a good one for those of you who are working in things like therapy or chiropractic, right? And then here's another regional storyteller we absolutely love. She says, again, it doesn't have to be this beginning, middle, end narrative where you slay the dragons. Storytelling is so powerful for Ursula Le Guin, she says, when you are actually, instead of talking about a process or a journey, you're talking about a beautiful house. If the house is soundly built, she says, this is the interior, the scape of the story. That's the house, she says. What happens inside this house, this landscape of storytelling, if it makes sense, if it's memorable, if the back door, the exit, what happens at the end, it's not any more important than any other part of it, she says. A true customer or client experience, a user experience, is often about the thickness of what happens in the midst of that use case. I call this the core dilemma, right? That's the interior of the house. It's the interior of the story. So for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to talk to you about what that is and how to discover that. For those of you who are doing career storytelling, it's interesting because I never thought to do one-on-one storytelling coaching, but people who come to my seminars often about business storytelling ask me to work with them. And so I give them a really, really affordable rate on it. And I'm happy, like I said, to work with any of you for an hour pro bono. But I tend to work with them to get to the midst of their core dilemma as a person. Who's the core of what you have come to be? What does it mean to you? And how do you feel standing at that crossroads right now, facing it? What are the decisions that you're making? Make that the core of your career storytelling, right? That moment at the crossroads, not the dragon that you're slaying, right? Nobody needs to get slayed in a bad way. Instead, we slay our fears. We make informed decisions at the crossroads. We look at the power and the material work that we've done and the impact that we can have, and we make those decisions, right? So empowering ourselves around that core dilemma. I'll tell you what that is in just a sec. when we learn about TED Talks, we often don't face a core dilemma. We are hearing a really compelling story, but we are not learning to adopt a product, right? So we hear about storytelling as persuasion or an origin story, but we often bypass that discovery. So those of us who are doing career storytelling, I went and called some of my cousins, my friends from grade school, some of my former coworkers, and I asked them to tell me, what about working with me felt really compelling to you? Where did you think I was distracted or struggling? Where did you think I had the most power? In other words, I interviewed my users and my customers. For a small business, the gelato example I think really shines. For those of us running a service, asking for feedback in a structured way, and I'll show you how to do that after you work with them, can be really powerful for that. I used to be embarrassed about asking for referrals or asking for quotes from customers, but I'm not anymore because I've made it a practice to do so. And I tell them at the top, when we finish, I'd like your clear feedback on how this went for you. So it's been really powerful. And then that becomes part of your storytelling as well. Now you've got quotes, right? Stories are humanity's oldest and most powerful tool for data collection, right? And social media. It's a highly technical skill, as you heard with Edward Colty, adaptable to the audience and times at hand. The amount of gnosis or know-how that goes into the kind of storytelling that both Ursula Le Guin and Edward Colty do is amazing to behold. Working in the Mississippi Delta and hearing what Black Southern storytellers do to learn the skills of storytelling, it is a lifetime of learning. In West Africa, where I worked primarily with storytellers because they tended to be the people using social media in the most powerful ways. This is 10% of the population who are born into families of storytellers. They're called griots or gewel in Senegal. So it's a really important technical skill. And so if you feel like you're not quite hitting the mark, don't kick yourself. Like there's a whole world of ways to approach storytelling out there. What I'm hoping to do in the next couple minutes is help you synthesize that. And this is the most important thing about storytelling. You move listeners to action. This comes from not only people like Edward Colty telling us about how the salmon spirit is struggling and makes these mistakes and there's mass destruction. And it feels so terrible. And then he goes back and rights his wrongs. He corrects his mistakes. He learns, he improves, and he becomes a very powerful leader, right, in his region and far beyond. Stories move listeners to action by inspiring them maybe to buy your product, maybe to invest in it, or maybe to change their minds about the ways that they feel about the gelato experience. Hey, we've got really great gelato. There's a lot of great gelato shops in town, but what we do is give you an experience. We make sure you have somewhere to sit. We make sure you have somewhere to socialize, right? We facilitate kids getting in and out of there. Like that, those are our primary customers, right? We care. So it can move listeners to action. It involves embodied empathy. Hey, I don't just like my customers and want to sell them good gelato. I have an embodied sense of how that kid felt when he felt guilty because he had to go to the bathroom, and he had to miss his gelato because of it. I mean, he was perfectly fine. He got his sugar fix, but still, right? That deep context and that rich data that helps us move like our customers move. So they're a superpower for high impact entrepreneurs. I'm going to skip this slide. You should always be telling and hearing your customers' stories, and then sit down every quarter, every 3 months or so, and rewrite the story that you tell about your product or service using some of those new insights that you've gained. And I'll show you how to organize some of those because it can feel a little daunting at first. This is what you do. Ask your customers or ask yourself, tell me about the last time you did this thing. Don't just tell me end to end what you did, though that is really helpful. Taking the moment of a use of a product or the moment you use a service and instead turning it into a timeline and asking how you felt. Let's walk through it step by step. What were you thinking and feeling as you were going through these steps? I was just feeling joyful and excited to celebrate with my kid, and he had been waiting for the gelato. I know I'm making this poor gelato shop. It totally wasn't their fault. But there was so much emotion invested in it. And there was like this guilt on my part and on his part, my kid's part. So now I thought about all of that. I thought about that end-to-end process. I've maybe asked my customers, or if I have a new product or service to introduce, I've thought through as if I were in the boots of my customers, what they would be experiencing end to end. So when did I know that I needed this product or service? How did I sort through solutions? Why did I choose this particular product or service? What were some of my doubts? Was it expensive? Was it hard to reach? Was it homemade instead of something that is proven on the market? Was it an experiment? Was I the first person I know to use it? And then why did I choose it? Um, how did it feel initiating the use of that product? How about during my time of use? And a lot of product stories are just like, when you taste this ice cream, this gelato, it's going to be the creamiest and it's exactly the kind of flavor you want. And it's going to be very unusual and it's really high quality. And there's none of that weird ice stuff that means it melted and then got refrozen. That's great. But it's the story around, right? The value proposition of the product or service that matters. And then ask yourself, who am I telling the story to? What is the exigence? So in the classic study of rhetoric, now we've got Ursula Le Guin, we've got the hero's journey from Mediterranean myth, but in a way that was picked up sort of in the northern Europe as a sort of way of, taking over your world. And it's very useful in some contexts, but not all. We've got this Chinook way of storytelling and studying folklore. I don't want to collapse all different ways of indigenous North American storytelling into one. Each storyteller, each tribe each group has their own storytelling practices. Okay, and then, but anyway, something that we can take from classic rhetoric, which is really that like Roman story in the public square that's meant to change people's minds. What are you trying to achieve by telling your story? Now, in classic Greek rhetoric, as it was adopted by the Romans throughout the Atlantic, um, it's all about that moment where you're standing in the public square and you're trying to get people to make a decision, right? To vote for this person or that person, to choose this course of action, to change their attitudes about something, to live differently, to interrogate a cultural value, to give resources over to something, to go to war, to not go to war, you know? And so using that rhetorical tool, what is the exigence? Why are you being called to tell your story or speak? So when we talk about business storytelling, I can sometimes get frustrated with seeing other seminars or coaches who aren't supporting business leaders in thinking through what is the storytelling situation you've got in front of you. Are you trying to convince customers to buy your service or product? Or are you trying to convince stakeholders in a pitch deck for them? Those are two different things, but they can often work together. So you want to think that through. Who are you talking to? What kind of outcome do you want from your storytelling? That's going to help you guide that selection of the value proposition that you're trying to show. And what I'm talking about with the gelato is they could tell us all day how good their gelato is, but the real value proposition for us is the experience of the gelato, right? And then I'm going to find a story that shows a core dilemma on the part of the kid who's just coming out of school. And what do? They open a second window, or somebody comes out with a little spoons of ice cream for the kids to choose before they save the day because they've thought through and anticipated the experiential part of our story or business. Now you can put it on a timeline and you can think through what are 6 steps with your core dilemma, or the main step 5 is the core dilemma. That's that key moment where if a customer uses your product or service, it changes their outcomes. It changes their outcomes. That's the moment, the make or break moment. There's usually feelings attached to it. When I had that slide about Meet Josh at the beginning of the story, I decided to eject that story because it's all about a tech user who's fixing a system that was broken using my software. And he did a great job of fixing his system, but what he couldn't do is communicate with the rest of his team about this issue because our product didn't. He's going to get fired from his job, right? That core dilemma is often something secret and emotional about what our customers, users, or markets experience that we didn't anticipate. That's that experiential question. It's embodied. It's that make or break moment. So what is that for your product or service, right? And Craig, hearing about public servants right now and the kind of work that they do and have done traditionally, that a big part of that job is discovering what is meaningful about the work you do to the citizens, the groups, the people that you are serving, right? And when there's a fundamental difference, and I don't mean to project this on your situation, but in industry at large, in government at large, in large organizations, I often see conflict in the core representation of what we think we are meant to do, which is create something quality and impactful and meaningful for our customers to rise to the occasion of the resources they're inventing in us and often or investing in us. And often organizations who define that differently, it's about the bottom line. It's about how much gelato we can sell, this poor gelato shop, right? And when we find ourselves drifting away in what we believe deeply in the core of what we're doing and what we serve, because we need to have passion for what we do. It is literally, I can say as an anthropologist of innovation, built into our DNA to want to make meaningful things for each other. When we are suspended from that, it hurts us. It comes across as interpersonal stress or a layoff or just like, depression, right? So here we are seeking something bigger. Let's find what that impact is. What is the core dilemma we're solving for our customers, right? The make or break moment. So I can send this along. I can actually probably maybe have Janine send a link to this, or actually just find me on LinkedIn and I'll drop this ebook. It's something that, oh, I see chat is coming alive. I'll drop this ebook in a LinkedIn message or an email for you. So reach out and I'll send this your way. This script is really meant for like more techie type products or like more complex products, but this should work for consumer stuff too. So take what you like and leave the rest, but I'm happy to share this with you. This is where you walk through with a customer or with yourself, imagining yourself to be one of your customers from beginning to end. What was your life like before you realized that you had this need? What triggered the use of this product? What were your outcomes? What outcomes did you need, right? My outcomes at the gelato shop were different from what the gelato shop wanted them to be or thought they were. Okay, now I'm going to begin action. Now I'm hitting that core dilemma. This isn't going to work. What's the battle? What was the decision making around that? What were the outcomes? Well, we're doing boba instead now. And the outcomes were we got displaced, and disappointed. And the attitudes were, cool, I love that place. Can't be stuck in a situation like that again. So you make it a script when you talk to your customers. So find that make or break moment, that core dilemma. When your product or service serves that core dilemma, that's your unique value proposition on the market. It helps you understand how to serve your ideal customer profile, not just anybody, right? But the kind of person you want coming to or to work with in your business, depending on whether you've got a product or service, right? The right kind of customers. It's often not located at the beginning or the middle of the action, but just before. It's like that really emotional moment before the user or customer buys you, uses you, etc. It's very often visceral or personal and emotional. And although, thinking through Ben and Jerry's story does I like to imagine myself on a beautiful organic farm in Vermont. It is, it doesn't convince me to buy the ice cream when it's a couple bucks more for a pint of that than something else. For me, the emotional piece is I'm on a budget. I want to surprise my kid. I'm going to get him some ice cream, right? Sometimes it's really thrilling. It's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to go to the roller disco today. I'm going to go to the roller disco. I'm just going to make a split second decision to do this. If I can get my skates on and whatever, but if the music is right on and I feel free on that floor and it's inclusive and it's queer and it's wonderful, it's thrilling, the experience of that is so much more important. I'm going to keep coming back. I'd rather hear about that moment and how that affects my users or customer. So I keep going on. So here's a gift. Imagine yourselves between these two incredible storytellers from our region. Put yourself here, right? You are the business storyteller. Get deeper. Ask questions. Find that core dilemma, right? And I'm here. You're welcome to reach out anytime. Like I said, this is a labor of love for me working with ORPIB. So I'm your thinking partner anytime. So reach out and say hi. There you go. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm there live all the time. I'm on the ORPIB Discord. And also, if you want to get involved with Incubator, let me know because we are looking for collaborators there. So I've got a few minutes for questions. if anybody has them.
I missed what you just said about who's looking for collaborators.
Our business incubator. So the
Ah,
yeah, if you go to the ORPIB Foundation, which is distinct from ORPIB itself, the chamber, because it's a 501(c)(3), I think, or 501, something close to that. Janine, correct me if I'm wrong. It's a nonprofit.
hmm.
And we serve the broader community. So we are sort of doing things like the business incubator and mentorship. So yeah, reach out to me if you want to hear more about those programs.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to have more participants in those.
Hi, Ali, it's Craig. You can definitely sign me up. I'm a trained facilitator for a federal government. I've had many experience, and I used to train brains on bias or anti-bias training. So you can definitely sign me up on that. I think this is very relevant, and the reason I signed up for this is I'm going to be doing the storytelling session for the PACO Gala in December. I'm the keynote speaker for that gala. I'm talking about storytelling, about pivoting while still utilizing DEI as a pillar of or foundational pillar of an organization. So still honing and owning the fact that we are underserved communities, but also pivoting with the times and still being able to be relevant regardless of political stance at that time. So it definitely reached out on LinkedIn. I added you on it, and I think this is really, really great. But it's also, I loved how your story telling about the gelato place, but it also leads to a secondary story where how did your kid uncover boba and how did they uncover their favorite boba drink? So it's definitely multiple sides to the story and how you can pivot and also, I think one of the things I've learned out here, and based on what you were talking about, is that, and based on my experience, is every story is unique and very much the person's own. And therefore, if you hear a story that is, if let's say the gelato place was on this call, they
I
may
know. It's like I hope they're not.
no, but take that if they were on this call, they could have taken it personal. But as an organization or business, I think it's very important not to take stories like this to personal because that is your customer's experience and taking it as a learning lesson and and then turning it into a story of how you changed your ordering process based on the feedback provided to you through a very personal story of your customer is very value added to the area of storytelling. So that's all I had to say today.
Oh, Craig, yes. I don't, I feel like you could have been sitting here for the last 45 minutes. It'd be really fun to meld minds and see what you're seeing. I think, as someone who have been doing this kind of work, decolonizing work that I was trying to do, and I feel like I was able to support a lot of my students. I still do teach for Pierce College in Tacoma, and so I do work with a lot of students in empowering them when it comes to those questions of DEI or continued commitment to redistributing power in organizations. You are absolutely right. The implicit piece here that you just made explicit, I think for this presentation, I could have done more of that even, is to say, when we talk about the embodied experience of being there, all of a sudden these programs that are supposed to fall equally upon and benefit all employees in the same way or benefit all community members in the same way because we're telling the story from the perspective of the product and what it's supposed to do instead of hearing how did this actually work for your body. I worked with someone who for instance in the metro study who was really proactive about signing up for the study and she was without sight and she said follow me to my recycling bin and take a video and it Metro ended up investing quite a bit more in, and they already had quite a bit more in services for citizens with who experience disability, right? Because the power of witnessing her try to use her recycling bin was so it hundreds of thousands of dollars became reinvested there. So Craig, I'd love to hear more about how you're using it or how you would use some of it. But it sounds like you know a lot too. So I'd love to hear what you're reading and maybe we can share some links back and forth too.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. I used to be the director of humanitarian aid for at the border, so that is near and dear to my heart, and that's what I've been doing for the last 7 to 8 years. So yeah, definitely love to trade resources as well as be able to hone my story as we speak, because we have several high-level people that will be in the room during my speech.
Aren't we lucky to be in fellowship with such awesome people? I just am struck by how grateful I am to find, I'm actually a little emotional, how lucky I am to be in this space with people who really give a fuck about our world and who we are and about connecting in this way on days like this. So thank you for offering that. And thanks to everybody for being there. I'm here for also being an anthropologist. I hold people's stories with absolute privacy. So I'm here to speak with you whenever you like or to hear what you've got. I have a ton of different resources, like those stories from the Chinook. It's really incredible ways to think about storytelling that reveal more textures of our experience than that sort of end to end hero's journey, which is very masculine, very capitalist way to think about stories sometimes. Yeah, Janine.
Hi, yes, I could listen to you talk about this all day, maybe for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted, in the last couple of minutes of the session, Kim has a question in the chat looking for an
Oh, I didn't see
example.
that. Okay.
That's okay. She just says, can you show an example of a small business doing a great job with this on their website or another format to share with her staff?
The one that I always use for this is nerdy, right? So this is like for software stuff, but Basecamp, Basecamp. I think it's .com, but if you look up Basecamp, it might be .io. Basecamp does a really good job of
Brandon's
taking
in
an
charge of this.
extremely dry business product and making it extremely personable. Like it's like so there's an extreme example of like business to business software as a service. It's a great job with their product storytelling. Why? Because they're reflecting the core dilemma of their users, which is like the chaos in how many tools people are trying to use, right? So there's a very non-emotional example. Good stories. I really like the storytelling that's going on with I've got it. I've got it. Well, Janine's a great example actually of doing it. And I'm not just kissing up to the teacher, but I think Oregon Pride in Business does a really good job of using storytelling and lifting up a diversity of stories to like make the social media content very compelling. It made me want to be a part of it. And I think, Janine, that comes from the one-to-one trusting relationship you have with so many ORPIB members that's reflected in the ways that you write blurbs. And there's, oh gosh, I'll think of a couple more. Oh, Tender Loving Empire. Tender Loving Empire here in Portland. They're getting lots of props too, but they are a regional business that sells products from regional makers. They do a great job with their business storytelling. And it's very emotional because they're, a little bit further away than your closest gift shop often, but you're compelled to go there because you know that you're feeding back into like actual people and you learn about the people in your community who made the things that they're selling. So they do a great job.